Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most universally recognized pieces of pop culture imagery out there. We're going to look at the actual hard archaeological evidence and completely dismantle a myth you've probably believed your whole life. That's right, we are unmasking the Great Horned Viking myth.
Section 1. The Universal Viking Myth. Our favorite caricature.
Okay, let's dive into this. When you close your eyes and picture a Viking, I bet you picture a helmet with two massive horns pointing right up to the sky. And, there's a really good reason for that. Movies, cartoons, games, illustrations, they have absolutely saturated our culture with this exact visual. Think about it. From those classic animated movies we watched as kids, to the massive blockbuster action flicks, to huge video game franchises, modern media has just cemented this horned helmet image right into our collective consciousness. It's literally the ultimate visual shorthand. If you want to show someone a Viking anywhere in the world, you just slap some horns on a helmet. It's kind of impossible to escape, right? But there is one massive problem with this ubiquitous image. It is entirely wrong. Which brings us to Section 2, the archaeological problem, the missing evidence. So the crucial point is, the dramatic irony here is just unbelievable. On one hand, you've got the pop culture Viking, horned helmets worn universally in battle, plastered across every screen and comic book page. But then, you look at the historical Viking, and there is absolutely zero solid archaeological evidence for horns in battle. Literally none. That foundational image we all have of a fierce warrior charging into a fight with giant horns on their head, it's completely missing from the historical record. We spend millions of dollars in entertainment recreating this iconic accessory that the actual warriors themselves never even wore in combat. Wild, right? And this brilliantly illustrates what they actually wore. Meet the German Boo helmet. This is one of the absolute best-known Viking Age helmets ever dug up by archaeologists. If you want to see a real, historically accurate piece of Viking headgear, this is it, the real deal. And what is the most noticeable feature missing from this authentic, historical piece of armor? Yep, no horns. It's just a practical, protective iron dome with a kind of spectacled guard for the eyes. That is the reality. Section 3, Tracking the True Origin. Who put the horns on? So where did the idea come from? Seriously, if it wasn't on the battlefields of the Viking Age, whose imagination actually cooked up this iconic look? We've basically got a fascinating case of historical identity theft on our hands here. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. If we go back much older than the Vikings, there actually were ancient European ceremonial traditions that used real horned helmets, but those were strictly for rituals, not everyday Viking battle gear. Then we hit the actual Viking Age, represented by our star witness, the Geirmundbu helmet, which, as we just established, has absolutely no horns. But fast forward to the 19th century, and the horns suddenly make a huge comeback through artistic interpretations and opera costumes, which brings us right to today, where that 19th century theater revival has completely morphed into the modern myth dominating all our media. You really got to appreciate the humor in this. Just think about the absolute grittiest, most intense, hypermasculine Viking video game or action movie you can imagine. The directors and designers of those modern epics, they've essentially been entirely fooled by 19th century theater geeks. It was actually the grand, dramatic flair of opera costume designers, people just trying to make their singers look larger than life on stage a couple hundred years ago, that actually gave us our definitive image of the fearsome Norse raider. Section 4. A modern manufactured myth. Art shaping history. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core truth of it all. The famous horned Viking helmet is largely a modern myth. Just let the weight of that settle for a second. It is wild to consider that a much, much later artistic interpretation became our primary historical lens. I mean, art literally shaped our perception of history. Those artists and costume designers in the 1800s were so incredibly successful with their dramatic vision that they completely overwrote the actual dirt and metal archaeological truth in the minds of the general public. One of the most famous historical signifiers in the entire world isn't really historical at all. It's a modern creation, born on a stage, amplified by the silver screen, and accepted by all of us without a second thought. Which leaves us with this final, kind of mind-blowing thought. If our most famous image of a Viking is really just a 19th century opera costume, what other historical facts are we getting completely wrong? Like, how many other things do we just accept as absolute truth simply because we've seen them in movies or cartoons 100 times? It really makes you wonder. I encourage you to keep questioning what you see, keep digging for that actual archaeological truth, and honestly, never underestimate the power of a really good costume designer. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.